The whisper of a myth. The galaxy was vast, filled with billions of stars, countless worlds, and endless civilizations. Yet in every corner of it, among merchants, soldiers, and rulers, there was one story whispered in fear. It was not written in records. It was not taught in schools. It traveled only as a rumor, a myth. The myth of a human warship. Most aliens dismissed it as nonsense. They laughed at the thought. Humans were considered young, weak, and chaotic. They had no empire that stretched across the stars. They had no fleets to rival the great powers. They had no seat in the council of the galaxy. To believe that humans had built a ship that could terrify entire armadas seemed foolish, but even those who mocked the story sometimes lowered their voices when the name of the warship was spoken. Because myths, no matter how absurd, always had a seed of truth. The whisper began long ago, when small outposts near human space vanished without reason. Entire patrols disappeared. Merchant ships that strayed too close never returned. Those who survived told strange tales. They said they saw a shadow moving in the void, larger than any dreadnought, darker than space itself. They said it had no markings, no colors, only a black surface that absorbed all light. Some claimed they heard a deep vibration, like the growl of a beast too large to imagine. Others swore they saw its weapons fire, silent beams that erased fleets in seconds. First, the empires ignored the reports. To them, humans were harmless. They traded a little, fought among themselves, and had no influence. But the whispers did not stop. In fact, they grew. Pirates who tried raiding near Earth disappeared. Smugglers spoke of losing entire crews to a black triangle that moved faster than anything they had seen. The myth traveled from taverns and spaceports to the halls of admirals. And slowly, quietly, the Empire began to fear. Still, the High Council dismissed it. They said it was just a story made up by traders who drank too much. They said pirates often destroyed each other and blamed ghosts. They said humans were far too primitive to make such a weapon. And so, the myth was buried under laughter. But, deep inside, those who had seen the shadow never laughed. Their eyes always darkened when the story was told. Then, one night, on the edge of a dying star system, the myth returned. Alien scouts patrolled a lonely sector, far from any capital. Their sensors picked up something massive. At first they thought it was an asteroid drifting through the void, but then it changed direction. Slowly, deliberately, like a predator that had noticed prey. The scouts tried to scan it, but their systems failed. Static filled their screens. Lights flickered. And then, out of the darkness, a shape emerged. It was sharp. It was silent. It was a ship. Its prow was long and triangular, cutting through space like a blade. Its surface was black, smooth, and without symbols. No empire's mark. No colors of alliance. It was a thing apart. A thing that belonged to no one but itself. The scouts panicked. They tried to send signals, but transmissions broke. They tried to flee, but engines failed. All they could do was stare at the giant shadow moving closer. For a moment, the void seemed to tremble with its presence. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. No warp signature, no trail of engines, nothing. It was as if space itself had swallowed the ship. The scouts finally regained their systems. Their screens lit up, their engines roared, and their fear returned with full force. They transmitted everything they saw back to the Empire. Their voices shook as they described the black ship. Their commanders listened but did not believe. Once again, the council called it nonsense. They said the scouts saw a reflection. They said systems malfunctioned. They said humans could not build something like that. But the signal spread. It reached other outposts. It reached merchants. It reached smugglers. And soon, the entire border of the Empire whispered the same words. The human warship has returned. The myth was alive again. Those who had laughed before now began to grow quiet. Rumors said the ship could cloak itself, moving unseen until it wished to strike. Others said it carried weapons so powerful that entire planets could be shattered with a single shot. Some claimed it was not a warship at all, but a living creature created by humans in secret. No one agreed on the details, but everyone agreed on one truth. Something was out there, something human, and if the myth was real, then the galaxy was not ready. In the chambers of the High Council, the leaders of the Empire argued. Some demanded an investigation, some demanded silence. They feared panic if the story spread too far. Yet no matter how much they argued, the whispers grew louder. For every time they tried to silence the rumor, another report came in. Another merchant vanished, another fleet went missing. And always, in the shadows of fear, the same name returned: the human warship. Across the stars, the myth had become a warning. To some, it was nonsense. To others, it was fear. But to all, it was unforgettable. And in the silence of the void, far from the eyes of the Empire, a black triangular shadow moved again. The first sight. The Empire could no longer ignore the whispers. The reports had become too many. Scouts, merchants, smugglers, even pirate captains all spoke of the same thing. A shadow, a warship, human. Some laughed, but others trembled. The High Council argued for weeks. Some believed it was only fear spreading like a disease. Others insisted that the myth had returned. Finally, the decision was made. They would send a fleet to investigate. The fleet was massive, one of the largest the Empire had ever assembled. Thousands of warships, each armed with heavy cannons, each carrying soldiers ready for battle. They gathered at the edge of human space near the same dying star where the shadow had been seen. The admirals were confident. They believed no human ship could match the power of the Empire's fleet. The armada spread out across the void. Rows of warships glowed against the backdrop of stars, their engines lighting the darkness like a wall of fire. Communication lines filled with proud voices. Soldiers spoke of easy victory. Admirals prepared speeches for the council, already planning how they would crush the myth once and for all. They thought they would return as heroes. But then, silence fell. It began as a faint ripple on the sensors. A distortion in space. Small, at first, then growing larger. The admirals ordered their ships into formation, cannons charged, shields raised. Every soldier watched the void. Every voice fell quiet. Then out of the darkness it appeared. The warship. It came slowly, with no hurry, as if time itself belonged to it. The shape was sharp and perfect, a black triangle cutting through the stars. Its hull reflected nothing, only absorbing light. For a moment, the admirals thought it was not a ship at all, but a fragment of night itself that had broken free. It was larger than they had imagined, larger than any Empire dreadnought. The silence in the fleet turned to fear. Thousands of alien soldiers stared at the giant shadow moving toward them. It gave no signal. It fired no weapons. It simply existed, and its presence was enough to shake them. The Empire's flagship, towering and proud, sent a message across the stars. "Identify yourself." The black warship did not respond. Again the message was sent. Again, silence. The admirals grew impatient. They believed the ship was only a trick, perhaps a stolen vessel or a creation of smugglers. And so they gave the order. The first barrage of fire lit the void. Thousands of beams, missiles, and torpedoes struck the black hull. Explosions filled space, brighter than a sun. The fleet roared with power, believing the myth would end in flames. But when the fire cleared, the shadow still moved forward, untouched. The Empire's commanders froze. They shouted new orders, launching more attacks, filling the void with destruction. The warship remained silent. Its surface glowed faintly as energy rippled across its armor, but it did not break. No human ship should have survived that storm. Yet here it was, calm and steady, as if the Empire's might meant nothing. On board the alien ships, fear spread like wildfire. Soldiers whispered in panic. Some refused to fire again. Admirals shouted at their crews, but even their voices shook. The myth had become reality before their eyes. Then the warship finally answered. Its weapons came alive with a glow that seemed to burn the stars themselves. No noise, no warning, just a sudden burst of energy from its core. A single beam tore through the void, and in an instant, an entire fleet of cruisers vanished. Ships that had stood for decades were gone in a heartbeat, their debris scattered like dust. The Empire's soldiers screamed. The admirals shouted for retreat. But the shadow was not finished. Another beam fired and more ships disappeared. It did not chase. It did not miss. Every shot was precise, deliberate, like the hand of judgment itself. The Empire's fleet collapsed into chaos. Ships collided in their rush to escape. Communication broke into desperate cries. Proud captains who had once laughed at the myth now begged for mercy. Yet the warship did not pursue them. It moved forward slowly, ignoring the broken fleets around, and the surviving admirals watched in silence as the black warship passed. It did not strike them. It did not end them. It only moved, calm and unstoppable, as if they were beneath its notice. The humiliation was worse than death. They had thrown their greatest fleet at it, and the warship had shown no effort, no strain, only indifference. One alien soldier whispered in fear, "It is not a ship. It is a god." Others nodded, their eyes wide, their hands trembling. None of them could understand how humans had created such a thing. None of them wanted to believe it. Yet none of them could deny what they saw. The warship slowly disappeared into the dark, its engines leaving faint trails of blue fire. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. No warp signature, no trace, only silence. The Empire's fleet floated, broken and scattered. Survivors sent reports back to the Council. Their voices were filled with terror. The myth was no longer a whisper. It was truth. The human warship had appeared, and nothing in the galaxy could stop it. And far away, beyond the edge of their vision, the black warship continued its journey. Silent, patient, waiting for the next move. The galaxy would never be the same again. The clash of fire, the Empire could not accept what had happened. Their greatest fleet had fired with all its strength, and yet the human warship had moved forward without fear. Reports spread through the galaxy like fire. Admirals tried to hide the truth, but survivors whispered the same words. One ship destroyed many. The myth was real. The Council called it impossible. They said no vessel could withstand that level of firepower. But deep down they all knew the truth. They had seen the recordings. They had heard the cries of their soldiers. Still, pride would not let them surrender to fear. They gathered another fleet, larger than the first, drawn from every corner of the Empire. This time, they told themselves, the warship would fall. The fleet assembled near a dead moon, waiting like hunters in the dark. Thousands upon thousands of ships, destroyers, cruisers, dreadnoughts, all shining with the banners of the Empire. Their engines glowed, their weapons charged. The admirals gave speeches of courage. Soldiers shouted in unison. Yet behind their voices, fear remained. They remembered how one beam had erased entire formations. They remembered how the warship had ignored them like insects. But orders were orders, and so they prepared to fight. The silence of the void was broken when it appeared again. Out of nowhere, without warning, the black triangular shadow cut across the stars. It moved with the same calm, the same silence, as if nothing in the galaxy could challenge it. The fleet trembled. Admirals shouted for fire. Cannons roared. The void lit with fury. Beams of plasma, streams of missiles, waves of torpedoes all hurled at the warship. Explosions lit the black hull in white fire. For a moment, the admirals believed they had won. For a moment, hope returned. But when the fire cleared, the warship still advanced. Its surface glowed faintly, energy rippling across invisible shields. It had endured the storm. Then the warship answered. Its main cannon flared like a new star. A single burst tore through the enemy's front line. 10 ships vanished in an instant, their wreckage scattered into space. Before the admirals could speak, another shot followed. 20 ships gone, another blast. 30 ships erased. Each strike was precise, each one absolute. No wasted energy, no missed target. The fleet broke into chaos. Captains screamed at their crews. Soldiers begged their commanders to retreat. Some ships turned to flee, colliding with others in panic. The admirals shouted orders, but their voices were drowned in terror. The warship moved like a predator among prey, firing with cold precision. Small ships tried to swarm it, racing close with desperate attacks. The warship's secondary weapons came alive. Streams of light cut through them, like blades slicing fighters and bombers into dust. Others tried to flank it, but turrets rotated smoothly, erasing them one by one. No maneuver worked. No weapon reached its core. To the Empire, the battle was a nightmare. They had brought a storm of fire, but the warship was the storm. Every shot it fired carved fear deeper into their hearts. It was not simply a ship. It was a message written in destruction. Admiral Kreth, leader of the Armada, watched as his fleet crumbled. His eyes were wide, his voice broken. He had once called the myth a lie. Now he whispered to himself, "It is death itself." He gave the order to retreat, but by then, retreat was already happening. Ships fled in every direction, abandoning formation, abandoning pride. Some even shut down their weapons as if surrender might spare them. But the warship did not chase. It did not destroy those who ran. It only cleared a path through the fleet, striking those who resisted. Calm, precise, patient. It was not fighting a battle. It was delivering a lesson. Within an hour, the largest fleet in the Empire's history was gone. What remained were scattered survivors, broken ships limping through the void, their soldiers silent and hollow. They had seen something they could never explain, something they could never forget. The warship slowed, its engines glowing faint blue. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the final strike. But instead of fire, the warship sent a signal. It was not a long speech, not a threat of conquest. It was a simple transmission, broadcast in every alien tongue. "Do not touch Earth. This is your last warning." The words echoed across the fleet, across the Empire, across the galaxy. No admiral spoke. No soldier moved. All of them understood. The message was not just for them. It was for everyone. The warship turned, fading into the darkness, leaving silence behind. Survivors sent their reports back to the Council. This time there were no arguments. No one called it a myth. No one called it a lie. Every corner of the galaxy now knew the truth. Humanity had built something that should not exist. The clash of fire was over, but the shadow of fear had only begun. The message of fear. The Empire had been broken twice, and yet no one could believe it. A single warship had faced two armadas and left them shattered. The loss was not just numbers or ships, it was pride. Empires were built on the illusion of control, the belief that their fleets ruled the stars. But now that illusion was gone. Survivors returned with hollow eyes. They spoke little, but when they did, their voices carried the same truth. They had seen a ship that ignored fire. They had seen weapons that erased fleets with single blasts. They had heard a message that no ruler could forget. Do not touch Earth. The High Council gathered in its great chamber, a hall of shining crystal that reached toward the stars. Representatives of dozens of species filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the throne of the Emperor. The air was heavy with fear. Some demanded war. Others begged for peace. Voices clashed, louder and louder, until the chamber shook with chaos. "Humans cannot be allowed to command such a weapon," one delegate cried. "They already do," another whispered. "Then we must destroy them before they grow stronger," shouted a third. "And how will you destroy what your fleets cannot touch?" came the quiet reply. The Emperor raised his hand. Silence fell like a blade. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed unease. "We stand at a choice. We can pretend this warship is a myth, or we can accept that it exists. If it exists, then humanity has power we never imagined. If they have one ship, perhaps they have more." The Council froze at those words. The thought spread like poison. What if it was not the only one? What if Earth hid a fleet of shadows in its skies? The room filled with whispers. Fear turned to panic. Far from the chamber, ordinary people across the galaxy were also speaking. Merchants who once mocked humans now warned each other never to cross Earth's borders. Soldiers who once joked about weak humans now lowered their voices when the subject arose. In spaceports, in markets, in taverns, the same phrase repeated again and again. The human warship is real. The Empire tried to control the story, but the truth was faster than silence. Smugglers spread it. Survivors whispered it. Traders carried it to the farthest colonies. Soon, even species who had never met humans knew the tale. The myth had become legend, and the legend had become fear. Meanwhile, the human warship did not appear again. It vanished into the void as if it had never existed, leaving only wreckage and memory. Its silence made it more terrifying. Was it waiting for another battle? Was it guarding Earth? Or was it moving unseen through the stars, watching, choosing its next moment? No one knew. The uncertainty was worse than the battles. Armies shifted uneasily. Borders grew tense. The Empire ordered new fleets, but soldiers trained with shaking hands. Admirals studied the recordings again and again, but every time, the result was the same. Their weapons had failed. Their pride had failed. Some leaders began to whisper of peace. They said humanity should be approached, not attacked. They argued that Earth must be reasoned with before fear turned into open war. But others shouted that to speak of peace was weakness. To them, humans were too dangerous to be allowed to rise. Every day the Council grew more divided, and every day the galaxy grew more afraid. Yet humanity remained silent. Earth sent no diplomats, no fleets crossed borders, no voices answered the Council's cries. The only sound was the echo of that warning, do not touch Earth. In the dark of space, smaller species saw opportunity. They had long been ignored by the Empire, ruled by fear. Now they saw the Empire itself trembling. Some whispered that maybe humans were not a threat but a hope, a balance against the Empire's power. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's order began to shift, but the Empire did not see hope. It saw only danger. Fear turned to anger. Pride demanded revenge. And so, while the Council argued, secret fleets were built in hidden docks. Weapons never tested before were forged. The Empire swore that next time would be different. Next time, the human warship would fall. Yet even in secret, their builders whispered to themselves, what if it returned before they were ready? What if they never had a next time? On the borders of Earth, silence remained. Ships passed quietly, avoiding human space as if it were cursed. Traders steered wide, smugglers vanished, pirates fled. Not a single alien dared cross the line. It was not law that protected Earth. It was fear. And above Earth's skies, in orbit unseen by alien eyes, a single shadow floated. Its surface glowed faintly with power. Its hull was silent, its weapons dark. The human warship waited. It had no need to speak. Its presence was enough. The message had already been delivered, and the galaxy had heard it well. The shadow over the galaxy had changed. The human warship had appeared, fought, and vanished, but its shadow lingered. Every council chamber, every military base, every tavern in the farthest colonies spoke of it. The story spread faster than light. It became not just a warning, but a fear that lived in every mind. The empire that once ruled with iron fleets now lived with cracks in its pride. Its admirals sat in silence, their faces pale. They had seen fleets torn apart like paper. They had heard the warship's warning, and they knew, deep in their hearts, that no force they commanded could stand against it. Yet pride is not so easily buried. Some voices still called for war. They said the humans were weak without their ship. They said Earth could be burned before another shadow rose. They spoke with fire, but their words carried little weight. No soldier wanted to face the warship again. No captain wanted to meet that silent blade in the stars. The will to fight had been broken not by armies, not by conquest, but by fear. Across the galaxy, smaller races saw the empire tremble. Those who had lived for centuries under its rule began to whisper of freedom. They said if the empire feared the humans, perhaps they no longer had to fear the empire. A quiet rebellion of thought began to spread. one that no fleet could crush, and all of it had come from one ship, one shadow. Merchants changed their routes. Traders avoided Earth's skies not out of respect, but out of terror. Maps were redrawn with quiet lines, invisible borders no law had written. Where Earth began, alien ships dared not go. Not because humans had asked, but because fear had commanded. The galaxy learned a new silence. But the silence was not peace. It was tension. It was waiting. Every leader wondered where the warship had gone. Some said it had returned to Earth, orbiting unseen above the blue planet. Others swore it was still out there, moving from system to system, watching, waiting. Some even claimed it could be anywhere at once, appearing without warning, a ghost in the stars. No one knew. And that was worse than any battle. The Empire built new fleets in secret, forging weapons it hoped might pierce the warship's armor. Scientists worked without rest, searching for answers, for weaknesses. But even as they built, even as they planned, whispers followed them. What if the warship comes before we are ready? What if it comes tonight? The council tried to speak of strength, but its words rang hollow. Soldiers remembered how quickly their comrades had been erased. Admirals remembered how their ships had burned. No promise of new weapons could erase those memories. The fear was carved too deep. Among the stars, stories grew larger with each telling. Some said the warship was not made by humans at all, but by something older, something humans had found and claimed. Others said it was alive, a creature that obeyed humanity. Still others whispered that the ship was only one of many, and that Earth's skies held a fleet waiting for war. The truth did not matter. The fear mattered, and fear ruled the galaxy now. On Earth, humanity remained silent. No statements, no threats, no diplomacy. Their world spun quietly under its sun, untouched and unchallenged. To the outside eye, Earth seemed small, ordinary. But in the shadows above its skies, the warship waited. Its hull glowed faintly with power, invisible to alien eyes, patient and watchful. It did not need to move. It did not need to fight. Its presence was enough. In the end, the myth had won. The whispers that once mocked humanity had turned into the loudest truth the galaxy had ever known. The empire that once thought humans weak now trembled at their silence. And the smaller races who once ignored them now spoke their name with, "Oh, the galaxy had many empires, many armies, many weapons." But only one myth had become real. The human warship. It was no longer a shadow. It was a force that changed the stars without firing a single shot more. And as long as it drifted in the void, silent and unseen, the galaxy would live beneath its shadow. Not knowing if it would strike again. Not knowing when. Not knowing how. Only knowing one thing. Humanity had spoken its warning, and the galaxy had listened.